Bald Explorer live reading. I'm Richard Vobes. We're continuing with our reading of A Sussex Peep Show by Walter Wilkinson. And what a lovely, delightful read it is. And it's getting close to the end. I'm really quite regretful that we're getting close to the end on this one. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Hello to TurboStream, who says he's sitting eating parsnip and leek soup all from the allotment this morning, and it's really nice. I'm so jealous. I am so jealous. I still have one of your marrows left, by the way. I've eaten the other one or two. It took a while to get through it, and I've got one, so I should be making something, a stew, with that a bit later, actually. I've just lit the Essie before I did the show, and I've been making some bread just prior to doing this. Mike Stevens, hello to you. He says, looking out over a peaceful Cornish fishing village in the sunshine. Oh, how lovely. And Nigel Sadler says, standing by with the maps. Excellent. Laura, beg your pardon, says, good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a lovely day. Yes, so far, so good. No waves on the sea, says Mike Stevens today, but the sound of the waves are breaking gently, which is lovely. And Lee Lawson is there. Linda Kane. We're having watercolour sunrises on Gabriola Island. I don't know if I spelt that right. Not spelt it, pronounced it even. I probably look a little bit. I look a bit orange, don't I? Still haven't quite got these colours right, but anyway. All pale pinks and blues and mist rising from the valley, says Laura. John F., good afternoon to you. Lovely Julia, hello to you. Linda Kane, love a stuffed marrow. Yes, I wonder what you stuff a marrow with. And Harvey Grant, hello, mate. Please do more exploring in Tunbridge. Yes, I'm sure I will, actually. I do need to get over to Kent. And once I get my van, I shall be over there a bit more frequently. Michael White, hello peoples, and Anna H, can't wait to hear. So, I think we will progress. If I haven't said hello to you, then I apologise. We are on chapter 11, Angmering to the Sunny Hills. The weather was so fine that all the problems in our camping life seemed to have disappeared. There was no restriction to our space, for we had all the meadows to move in, and even time itself was getting its edges a little blurred and softened. We could pack when we liked and march when we wished, without having to calculate when the rain would begin or cease. The danger was that in the hot days we would not move at all, but squat like the lotus eaters in utter contentment and warm comfort, just when we happened, wherever we happened to be. Sorry, I've also got a mug, a Bald Explorer mug as it so happens, with coffee in, which I am enjoying. There was always shade under the trees and refreshment in the cool grass, whereas on the road under the blazing sun there would be hard, hot work before another camp was found. And living in the fields in the sunlight brought a curious nonchalance to our egos. The baker's meadow above Angmering turned out to be a sort of recreation ground in the morning, and we found that we had pitched the tent within a few yards of the cricket pitch. A practice game went on, seemingly all about the tent, and curious children settled down to observe us. Actually, I'm wondering if, Linda, you know where that might be, where the old cricket ground would be, because when I do my reenactment of where he goes, it would be fascinating to... I should gather all this information. Nigel, you need to send me a copy of the maps so that I can go to the places that we deem where he's gone, because you know what fulsome errors I make when I go on my own. One cricket ball came into the tent while we were breakfasting, and we lived in constant fear of the thin fabric of the tent being pierced by certain tin aeroplanes that the children shot into the air without the least regard for us. In spite of the inner knowledge that we ought to have been annoyed, the publicity seemed a very small thing. when we were all submerged together in the mellowing influence of the glorious morning sun. As we had missed the milkman, the baker's daughter came out with a jug of their own milk for us, and it was not until she had gone that the awful realization came that I had received the lady with a half-shaved face. Camping and the eccentricity of performing in the street had taught us that much, that we did not lack friends even if we did stray a little from our own niggardly path in life. We loitered in the sun to no particular hour in the morning, and drifted out of the meadow into Angmering, which, with its Red Lion Inn and the gabled cottages, the broad street and the trees on the green, was quite a village of olden times. Clearly is taken with Angmering. We bought newspapers from the draper and collar studs from the grocer, all very leisurely in the hot morning, and moved dreamily out of the village to the road among the quiet fields leading to Findon. A short spell on that Arundel to Brighton road enlivened us a little, and we were both astonished and terrified to find the motorists whizzing past us, quite oblivious of our sun-drenched mood. They were behaving in quite the ordinary way, dashing through the lovely countryside as quickly as they could, victims of their own cleverness. Few of them will know the charm of lunching under a tree by Patcham Pond, with its lilies, with its moorhens dabbling in the reeds, and the blue of the sky reflected in its grass-bound waters. Nor would they give themselves the opportunity of making the acquaintance of the gentleman with the mouth-organ, who carried all his earthly possessions in a dirty sack. "Good morning. How does this weather suit you?" we greeted our brother of the road. "Bit hot, isn't it, lady? I shouldn't mind if it rained a bit further for a change. Weather's been so dry, I've been doing a bit of nature cure and putting my money in the bank. I've been able to sleep anywhere and walk anywhere at any time of day or night this past week." "Why don't you have a little tent like we do?" "What, like the Jippos?" he said, with a touch of scorn. "I've been sleeping anywhere, and there ain't much to it, lady. I kept down in the wood one night, but the bloomin' owls kept me awake. I couldn't sleep. They screeched at me like a lot of blinking monkeys, and I came out and I looked. And then I tried a haystack one night, and I'm blessed if a lot of rats didn't come dancing around. Creepy they was. Flop, flop, flopping about. I told 'em right off. All right? Right off. I couldn't stick it. I usually is a bit of a downer in the day, but you see, I've got to give 'em a bit of the organ now and then to get me hot water, else I'll walk all night and I'll be asleep all day." "You don't seem to like the simple life much." "I like my comforts, lady. I've been out all day. I want a good mattress under me, somewhere I can smoke a pipe behind the windows. If some of these people as talks about fresh air as much as fresh air as I get, they'd want a bit of change sometimes. They wouldn't say no to a good lodging if they got eightpence in their pockets. It's all right for them as motors from one meal to another to sit in the garden and talk about fresh air, but let them kip out in the woods with a draught in both their ear holes and birds screeching like mad, and then see what they say." "What are you doing? Not looking for work, are you?" "No. All the same, if I was, sir, I've never had a trade. Used to work with horses and do a bit of carting. Then I had a holiday. Now I'm on my own. I give 'em a bit of music." Here he displayed a mouth-organ. "I'm a traveller, that's what I am. I'm on my own, so it don't matter. Work's for working people, and then they can get it. And then they can't get it, not if they spit themselves dry for it. Got to look after yourself nowadays. Been doing well, sir?" "We don't try to do well. We go to all the pretty places where there's no money and sometimes hardly any people. I see. A bit of a sport like, is it? I thought you wasn't regular hedge birds. You ought to go down to Brighton Front with that show. You wouldn't half make some money. They wouldn't let us set up the place in a place like that. No, nor me neither with my mouth organ. Well, good day, sir. I'm not going to stop here and give 'em a bit of music. Oh, I'm going to stop here and give 'em a bit of music. As we pulled away from the 3 or 4 cottages, we were followed by the bit of music, coming surprisingly efficiently from the cheap instrument. He has my respect and envy, that man, for I have blown into many mouth organs and have never produced a tune with that exactitude and gaiety of attack. The throbbing main road had this much value for us that when we turned off towards Findon, the quieter way enclosed us more graciously. After passing the Clapham woods, we walked from the green shade and the restricted view into an open downland valley, a great basin enclosed by the open rolling hills, and so magically bright that it seemed compounded of air and colour and sunlight more than of solid earth. The sun streamed down on the distant woods, rimming each tree with a halo of light. There were patches of browny green hay-grass over which the wind passed in grey waves. There was young corn in its deep emerald tint, and on every hillside hovered a mass of blazing mustard. Leaning straw stacks raised their pale gold against the blue sky, and here a curling elm posed elegantly and darkly against the illuminated background of brilliant sunny fields. There was one man ploughing, and several sunburnt labourers piling a high haystack. We envied them, the rightful owners and natural inhabitants of this golden valley. We loitered on the ribbon of a road that wound its way under these bright hills, and ahead of us, hedgeless and open to the grassy country, mounted the side of the last hill, and at the high corner disappeared enticingly into further magic lands. We loitered on this road, and, forgetting easily our duty as showmen, toyed with the idea of camping there. It was difficult to leave it on so lovely an afternoon, and coming to the odd cottage with the round tower and the castellated facade — oh, he's on Longfurlong, that's where he is — we asked if it would be a criminal offence to camp for the night on the hilltop. Oh, it's interesting, that must be at Longfurlong, on the road down from Finland, of course. The woman was doubtful and advised us to get permission from the landlords, who, very inconveniently, lived in Chichester. A week's tramping away at our rate of travelling. But a bold young man in the background, shaving, I think, was all the time uttering a series of sarcastic remarks, very much in our favour. Camp? Course they can. Ask for permission? No. Camp on the top of the hill. Course they can. Nobody will say anything. I notice you lot are saying lots, so let's have a quick gander at what you're saying. Roasted marrow sounds good with goodies, says Turbo. Linda Kane says, could be decoy field at the top of the village, now the local wreck. Harvey Grant, oh yes. Hi Nigel, remember you did like the video of him around Tunbridge. Oh yes, there we go. It would be nice if the In the Footsteps of could be done with a real Punch and Judy performance at some points. Oh, wouldn't that be great to get hold of some Punch and Judy puppets and stop and erect a tent and get some shots of me hoiking this barrow, try and emulate the whole barrow. I mean, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Patching Pond, says Linda. Yes. I remember watching 12 minutes after it was posted. Oh, well done, Harvey Grant. Richard's yokels are wonderful. He has an empathy. Yeah, Mike Stevens says, you have a Cornish accent, Richard. That you do. Well, I don't know the Sussex accent. I can't give it to you accurately. And although the author here has tried to imitate it with the spellings of the words, I'll stumble, which is why I'm giving you a sort of generic yokel farmer West Country style accent to at least represent the character. Hedge birds. Yes, lovely term, isn't it? Those who sleep in the hedges. Was he calling him lady or laddie? I'm confused a bit. He was saying lady in the text, but but he might have been referring to him. That was quite, yes, because I can't imagine so far Winifred hasn't really been a prominent character. I think Wilkinson's travelling companion has morphed from a man utility to a woman. Yes, the utility left, if you remember, at some point. I remember that. Then he was on his own for a while, and then he met his wife at a station, Hayshot, I think it was, which may not be there anymore, thanks to a Beechings cut. I imagine it's gone. It must have been on the Midhurst line. I don't know. I'm surmising. And now his wife, Winifred, is with him. Longfurlong, the old toll house. Yes, that's what I immediately, as soon as he said the turret, I realised that's where he is. Says, I'm following on the map. Oh, well done. You're halfway there with the barrow using the Bessie, says Julia. Yeah, that's true. It would be fun to reconstruct his barrow, wouldn't it? And do that. It would be good. You could have a naked Punch and Judy puppets. They wouldn't need to buy. Then you wouldn't need to buy any.
That's the way to do it. Bark, bark. That's the way.
Hang on, let's Polly put the kettle on. No, it would be good, yes. It would be good to make them, wouldn't it? It would be good to make them. I'm sure that Julia is very artistic. I used to make puppets with papier-mâché. I'm sure I could do it. What we need is somebody to make the costumes. Why don't we do this? Why don't we stage the complete reenactment? I mean, the thing would go in the van. Once I've got the van, it could go in the van. I could pull it out the van, get the shots of me going with this thing. I've actually probably got, hang on a mo. Unless I've thrown it away. Some stripy material for the Punch and Judy booth. Wouldn't that be amazing? It would make we could do the whole video about the making of the whole barrow and videos about the whole preparation and then the trip. Of course, he does it in he starts off in the spring because he talks about the May flowers, the hawthorn blossom. But anyway, so there, Julia said she played Audrey, number 2, a hand puppet in the Little Shop of Horrors, once upon a time. Bless you. You could base Punch on Boris. Yes, I'm sure a lot of people do want to punch Boris at the moment. Thrown it away, says Linda Kane. Yes, what me? I may have had a moment, but I can't believe such a... it's got to be somewhere. It's not in the filing cabinet. You'll be pleased to know that. Right. But that's a brilliant concept. We could redo the whole thing and that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Because people would watch and think, what the hell is it all about? I want an adventure. Another adventure. Right. Yes, so of course you can. Park on the top. No one will say anything. It was sufficient encouragement for us, and we gazed up at the growing green heights, radiant against the sky, wondering how to convey the camp up that amphitheatre of steep, slippery banks. As a preliminary, we hid the barrow from the road traffic behind a haystack and then, by crafty tackings and devious routes, we conveyed part of the camp to the crest, left it in the care of the rock roses and the thyme, and descended for the second burden. 3 such journeys, 3 slippery ascents with burdened shoulders, found us on the down top, complete with camp and food. Water had been a difficulty. At a curious cottage we obtained a reluctant bucketful and heard a painful tale of their water supply. The cottage had no well, but only a cistern on a trolley, which had to be hauled down the road to other cottages and filled there. Where could there possibly be a cottage? I mean, if he goes further up, there's the... If he goes further up Longfurlong, there's a farm. What's it called? Begins with a T, doesn't it? And over the top of Longfurlong, you're coming up onto Salvington Hill, aren't you? Up there where, ultimately you'll come up to the mill, if my memory serves me right. Anyway, the Worthing Waterworks were only a quarter of a mile distant. The Worthing Waterworks then, I think, weren't they at the bottom of Sisbury Hill? Pumping water in an elegant chateau every minute of the day and night. Is that where I'm thinking? Right, North Worthing, just before the golf course, Worthing Golf Course, whatever it is. Is that where I'm thinking? But the cottage was divided from the company's land by a road, and so in all this plethora of water, the cottagers were condemned to shift for themselves. When troops camped there, water had been laid on for the camp within 20 yards of the cottage door, but the family had been prohibited from making use of it. And when he talks about troops, he must be talking about the First World War. It seemed rather feeble that so large and wealthy a town as Worthing could not have spent a few extra pounds and generously presented these honest people with a water supply. But of course, business is business, and not kindness and generosity, the delightful opposites which are often forgotten, and so the humble cottagers can go on struggling up and down the road with that cumbersome cistern of theirs for water, and never, I suppose, have enough of the precious liquid. Perched on the cool hilltop, instead of perspiring with the performance in Finland, the evening displayed its charms for us, and the sun went down splendidly over the valley. We sat among the herbs, surveying a world of hills and other dales, all radiant with sun and varied with woods and deep shadow. Dry, burnt-up hills in full sunlight glowed like pale gold. There were hills of a different cultivation, richly green and dark hills that looked formidable against the light. In the open valley, a large farm basked in the sun, and thither, as the evening fell, led plough-horses and hay-wains and slow, placid manoeuvres of the few fortunate habitants of this happy valley. And again, I'm assuming he's looking down on the valley of Longfurlong, and the hills he must be referring to is Black Patch and Harrow Hill, presumably. If he's on the top there, they can look grim and foreboding. Just north of Charmondine House, says Nigel. He can't have got that far. If he's climbed up the hill, if he's asked at the door of the tower at Longfurlong, which is, as I remember it, is an old toll house, isn't it? If he's climbed up the top there, it's a fair old trudge before he'd have to come. Well, he would be quite a distance from the Charmondine House. I want to go to Black Pit Hill, and I spy a trig point, says Turbo Stream. Yeah, I went up there and I got told off. I think the trig point on Black Patch is just off the pathway, and I went up there and did a video there a couple of years ago, and the bloody farmer came up, told me to get off the land, and I said I was only just having a look at the trig. Oh yes, the wonderful Cheryl Craggs could knit you some puppets, says Nigel Sadler. Yes, Julia, get on to her. Hill Barn, sure they haven't got that far. No, exactly, Linda. I'm the same. I'm on the same thoughts. For it sounds to me like they're sitting on the top of whatever the hill is called, above. Oh, what is that? Tote? Is it Tote Hill Farm? Tote rings a bell. Tote Hill Farm or something. Tote Farm. Down the bottom before you get to the Findon roundabout. Because if they'd gone, if they'd gone to Charmondine House, I mean, I know his route is all over the place. That's completely the wrong direction for Findon, and it would take him south of Nepcot and, the other side of, well, not quite the other side, but the south side of Sisbury. Tolmere, that's it. Tolmere Farm. I knew it was something like that. Sorry, I thought we'd gone offline then for a moment. Tolmere Farm is the farm he mentioned. Yes, there we go. Used to have a dew pond. Tolmere Farm. Yeah, excellent. That's where I think they are. Looking down on that. 4 o'clock in the morning found us with our noses among the dewy grasses and the close-up, sleeping rock roses. We looked across the shadowy grass to the trees, almost black against the sky, already glowing with the new sun. The long bars of cloud purpled and reddened luridly against the glimmering light of pale green. A sea of light, indefinable, remote from the world, the clouds and the moon, which rose and disappeared shyly behind a cloud at the approach of the sun. We lay in our sleeping bags while the earth awakened. The vague valley with its varying fields and roads, all muted in blue-grey veil, began to reveal its colours. There's only one road, really, but there's farm tracks, of course. There were a few birds on the downs, but from the breaks below, curiously, a distant chorus. What? There were few birds on the down, but from the breaks below came curiously a distant chorus. A sudden lark plunged into the heavens, and a pheasant broke screaming from the wood. When the breeze sprang up, the day was full awake, and we, like everything else, began to stir to our tasks. We intended an early start. It was during breakfast that a quiet pattering came on the tent, and on looking out we saw clouds gathering on the hills and serious rain impending. Those red bars of dawn should have been a warning, but we had grown so careless with the days of fine weather that rain, cold, wet rain, seemed impossible. Rain before 7, fine before 11 was a brief comfort. The clouds came lower, closer and thicker. The rain danced merrily on the thin roof, evidently set in for the day, and we were caught with very little food, not much fuel, 3 matches, not at all sure of our legal rights in camping on the down, and our poor barrow and show far away, reposing behind a haystack at the mercy of the rain and any passer-by. And that is chapter 11. All muted in blue-grey veil. Breaks are areas of woodland, I think. Ah, yes. Still confused about the waterworks, though, says Linda Kane. Used to be a water tower in Findon. Yes, I wonder if he's... because he's not got there yet, I wonder where he's referring. Chapter 12, A Stormy Night. All morning the rain beat a steady tattoo on our thin roof. But when, towards midday, a gusty breeze began to flap the tent, we imagined that we would soon be on the road. At the first cessation of the rain, we descended to the haystack to inspect the barrow, to find the boxes still impervious to the rain, and to encounter a shepherd and all of his 200 sheep. And what music the sheep made in that basin of green hills! Fresh from the fold, they were excited to be on new pastures, and as the shepherd and his dog coaxed them slowly up the hill, they protested in a melancholy symphony of baaing in every possible key and tone of sheep voice. The shepherd scanned the skies and said that there had not been a great deal of rain about. He had been also surprised to find the Punch and Judy behind the haystack, and had wondered what the devil it were. Some sort of glider, he had thought. His curiosity was infinitely revealed to find its owners and all there was to know about it. He followed his sheep over the lonely down, leaving us much encouraged with his idea that there was not much rain about. A downland shepherd, we thought, would know all about the weather. Full of inspired faith, we began to pack, but before we could get any of our stuff down the hill, the grey rain commenced again. Back into the tent we crept, to wait a little longer, to wait the whole afternoon, and turn our last half pint of water and the last match into a small, melancholy dribble of tea. And still it rained, and still we were prisoners in the little tent on the rainy hilltop. In all that quiet, wet world, we were alone. Works in the field were suspended, and in all those acres, peopled yesterday with farmers and tourists, there was no one to encounter but one passing shepherd. A visit to the cottage procured more of the scarce water and a precious box of matches, and after a humorous supper of soup and bread and marmalade, we began to nod a little sleepily in the darkening evening. At least we were dry and warm, and safe from the many things that comfortable citizens in their fine houses might fear, burglars, for instance, or bursting water pipes, or the strain of listening to incessant masterpieces poured out of the radio. We congratulated ourselves on our peace and immunity from troublesome neighbours, when, without warning, a very gruff and near voice came out of the gloaming. "Hello there! Have you got permission to camp like this?" We sat up in alarm, and looking out of the tent, found a stern keeper with a gun under his arm standing among the bushes. "Do you know that you're not allowed to camp here? This is private ground." "We don't want to camp here. The rain has caught us, and it's difficult for us to pack up with all the things so wet." "You can't camp here without permission." "We haven't got permission, and we don't want to camp here any longer than we can help it." "You ought to get permission to stay here, and I must ask you to go away." This was an uncomfortable prospect in the late, wet evening, and we began to feel exceedingly sorry for ourselves. We put our case pathetically before the stern keeper, until he became sorry too, and at last contented himself by saying that we must get away in the morning, or we would get him into trouble. We settled into the tent again, infinitely admiring of and grateful to the fellow who could imperil his livelihood by exerting a little kindliness. With the departure of the keeper, we considered ourselves secure for the night, and rather pleased with our wayward adventure of experiencing life on the lonely down. In a very short time, we had seen the passing of a variety of its moods, the peerless sunset, the starry night, and the stormy dawn. We were now free to pass a quiet night and go on in the morning. We slid into the sleeping bags, settling down in our 6 feet of dry earth among all those drenched and dripping hills. "It's a wonderful feeling," said Winifred, "to know that you can at least keep alive in a threepenny tent, even in this weather." "Yes," I agreed, snuggling into the warm eiderdown, "and perhaps more alive than some people manage in their perfect houses. It is wonderful that we're so dry after all this rain. And now that the tent is thoroughly soaked, it will be more waterproof than ever. I'm so comfortable that I don't mind what happens. Oh, nothing will happen. These little tents are wonderful." It was somewhere about here, in the fatuous conversation, that out of the dull, heavy evening there came a gust of wind which shook the tent to its foundations. We were startled, but agreed that this was a good sign. A wind would clear away the clouds, and before the morning the rain would be gone, and we began to look forward to a sunny morning and dry packing. As if in mocking commentary, a wild roar of wind passed through the neighbouring trees. The next tornado of wind seized the tent and shook it like a rat. In the meantime the rain increased, and gallons of water poured and roared on our thin roof. We cowered, waiting breathlessly for the total collapse, while the wind flustered and tussled under the slender cords. We began to imagine our house being plucked up from that high ridge, carried to the other side of the valley on the winds of the storm, and ourselves, in our sleeping bags, left like two large maggots to wallow in the flooded grass. But the tent held firm, and our faith in it returned. We attempted to sleep. We dozed, but immediately a spiteful blast billowed out the tent like a balloon, and then, with the report, like a pistol, suddenly contracted the billowings and shot a fine spray of water over us. This trick seemed to give the wind infinite pleasure. It howled with glee over its discovery, rattled the canvas, and teased and bullied us with a continual spraying. With the constant shaking, the pores of the cotton fabric were stretched open, and soon there was the ominous sound of water dropping into the tent. Drop, drop, smack. We set a pot to catch the drippings, and readjusted our beds to avoid the weak place. Presently the fitful wind settled down to a steady gale, and in a nightmare of rushing water and roaring wind we dozed, awoke with sudden frights, waited again for the wobbling tent to collapse, and dozed uneasily once more. We began to think of beds that we had slept in, and we realised the wonder of the first man who constructed a solid cabin and furnished it with a comfortable bed and dry sheets. The madness and the error of our ways became very patent. In the small hours, Winifred began to kick her feet about. "They feel uncomfortable," she explained rather vaguely, and then dozed again. It was not long before my feet, in sympathetic reflex, began to feel uncomfortable too. For a time we both fidgeted sleepily with this curious sensation, which was not exactly cold or painful or even alarming. It was just curious, and it was only when we were more awake with the glowing light that we sat up and found the ends of the sleeping bags swabbing about in 2 inches of water. Outside the rain still battered on our leaky house, while the low grey clouds slowly wreathed themselves through the wood and along the top of the down. The wind had forced a river of water under the tent, half of which was now a swamp. The malignant weather, furious at not being able to wrench away the tent, had found a more subtle means of annoying us. It was now a matter of confining ourselves to the very small, dry part of the tent and salvaging the drowned portion. Bit by bit, we dried hats, bags, boots and books over the primus, while we criticised the fine but deceitful evening which had enticed us into this dilemma. It was a slow, dreary business in the grey of the morning. Our patience gave way, and we began packing our wet effects, resolved to get away from the windy, cloud-swept hilltop and the general dampness as soon as possible. We were at the lowest point of depression. An Alpine storm could hardly have been more devastating to the spirits. We rolled up the wet sleeping bags, damp clothes and dripping ground sheets, while the thick clouds swept round us in a grey, damp pall. Then, for the comfort of all campers and for the confounding of all critics, at this 0 point, a light suddenly illuminated the tent. A faraway patch of blue, like an old friend, smiled at us from among the drifting mists. In a few minutes, a distant hill leapt into life under a beam of sunlight. All the clouds began to fly rapidly towards the sun, and miraculously the sky was a mixture of days, one half clear and blue, the other still low with the drifting rain clouds. With the return of the sun, we came to life again. The raindrops, which had been so dismal, all glistened like diamonds on the ends of the grasses. The flowers, under the warm influence, spread their odours into the air. Rabbits popped out their heads of their burrows, and birds went swiftly by on the wing. The great cloud shadows moved over the earth, which everywhere awakened the bright gladness and filled us with exhilaration. After the imprisonment, the road was ravishing in its interest, and we rounded the high corner of Finland Place at a smart pace, wondering eagerly as to what was coming next. Finland Place is, if I remember rightly, is up by the church, and it's now separated by the A24, which bypasses the main village. The road descended the wooded valley, with hidden in the trees, and rising above the green slopes, the wooded top knot of Chanctonbury, once more the eminent note in the landscape. But in Finland itself, we lost the downland atmosphere, encountering the roar and rumble of char-a-banc and omnibus, and the incessant invitations to tea. Turning south, we seemed to step into Worthing at once. We walked between concrete gutters, and in between the passing lorries we caught sight of all the invitations to rent or buy desirable garages with villa attached. Somewhere above us was the ancient Sisbury Ring, but it was difficult to disentangle the green hill from the hobble-jobble of estate agents' boards and new bricks. I wonder if they're going down Finland Valley and looking at the 1930s bungalows. When the great rain clouds began to blow up stormily from the sea, we turned away from the concrete gutters and pulling all our damp belongings up the long hill to High Salvington. Oh, they must be going up the Bostal Hill. Up the long hill to High Salvington, attempted to translate ourselves into dry and respectable house dwellers. Quite an amusing job, for once, in a way. That's up by the mill, which in a way, so they've gone up, presumably they carried on along the top of Longfurlong, came down, which I think is a public footpath now, which is on the Monarch's Way, probably, down past Field Place, I've done that walk, past the church, instead of going into Finland, they seem to have turned right, gone south, gone through Finland Valley, but not very far, where the old toll gate used to be, and turned right up Bostel Hill, and then they're heading up towards Salvington Mill, which again, he's very good at going round in circles, this bloke, because he was pretty much not too far from that when he camped the night before. Let me just, how are we doing on the time? A quick, Winifred is a real good girl. A very intense relationship. Oh, yes. How dare you, sir? Keith Walsh. There are few, now non-existent, little buildings, cottages around Blackpatch, nothing up the Church Hill. I am using an 1890s 0-inch, 20-inch map. Are you? Indeed. Good man. They were made of stern stuff. I think some of the reference to the cottage is the old toll house. There are a couple of cottages to the east on Longfurlong too. No Gore-Tex around then, says Mike Stevens. No, I spent the night in a tent just like that, says Lee Lawson. Fantastic. I think their feelings are more important right now. I got the impression they could have marched up Longfurling Lane. If not that, then the track passing Tolmere. Me too. A leaky tent in the rainstorm. We know where they are now, says Nigel Sadler. Finland Place, adjacent to the famous church with the infamous vicar who threw the Bald Explorer and the lovely Julia out of... to prevented us from filming there, the swines. He paints the scene, says Michael White, like Eric Ravilius, if that's how his name's pronounced. Finland Valley, A24. Yes, Michael, I love Eric Ravilius, both his name and the paintings. They must have entered Findon, but turned up Bostel before the valley. Yes. I mean, yes, absolutely. I guess that's right. The valley carries on, doesn't it? But there's you. I'm just trying to. I can't without looking at it. You go past. Do you go past the turning to Sisbury where the car park is, whatever that is? You go past that, and then there's the toll house where it used to be, and then there's the turning west up Bostel, isn't there? If I remember rightly. I think that's right. Are there any photos of Winnie? No, not as far as I've not seen any. Just get to the end of this chapter. Our bones dried on the high hill above Worthing. We looked down with gypsy eyes on all the new houses that scattered themselves out and up the downs behind the town. A vast area, very civilised, with wild Sussex well subjugated by pavings and lampposts and curbstones. Very true. And at that time, probably very pink curbstones, because Worthing used to have lots of pink paving. Not so much now. There are bits of it, but not so much. After being familiar with the unconfined downs for weeks, after growing used to the irregular masses of grass and the general contours of the hills, it was a painful experience to come into this world of straight lines and geometrically confined areas. The pretty open country, which no doubt had attracted the residents, was lost beneath a pushing exploitation. All the sensitiveness to anything that did not pay seemed to be absent. And instead of Sussex, you got, well, anything you would get in the urbanisation of any county. And yet we found a way out from the little rectangular gardens and the square houses and the immaculate lines of concrete guttering. It was down a lane fragrant with honeysuckle, and through some barbed wire to a closed footpath, stolen, I dare hazard, a forgotten path buried beneath hazel bushes. The wild mossy path led us through tangled undergrowths, through thickets and woods of large trees. I wonder if he's going west down Honeysuckle Lane, not Honeysuckle Lane, but the Honeysuckle, that place where Julia and I filmed fairly recently, and we did a bit of a silly walk and then we went into the woods. I wonder if he's gone there. He's talking about the undergrowth and the thickets, you see. It was a silent, buried way, eerie in its sudden remoteness from the building estates and the tea shops. Stoats hurried across the path, you'd be lucky to see those, and squirrels rang up the trees. The grass was strewn with feathers of pheasant and partridge, of jay and woodpecker, and in one clearing was an enormous keeper's larder of the wild things in a wood. The buried way between the tall walls of hazel enclosed us, and we seemed to be lost in some giant maze, a witch's trap, that just went on, until, escaping from the curse, we came out to the remote Clapham Church. The wholesome sight of the old farms and cottages, all set out on the green grass under the trees. So he's gone, bloody hell, he's gone west again. I mean, he pretty much, I mean, he was at Patching Pond, for goodness sake. He was pretty much there. He was pretty much there already, and he's done no show since, and they've had all this calamity. It's barking. The wholesome sight of the farms and the cottages all set out on the green grass under the trees. By the road and through more of Clapham Woods we came to Highdown. Right? The first little conical hill from the sea, a modest vanguard to the greater downs, and from its breezy summit, if you like that sort of thing, you can look east and west along the southern face of the downs, the flats between the down and the sea, and all the glittering waters of the channel. And if you read your guidebook before you go, as we neglected to do, you will see that the tomb of John Oliver, the philosophic miller, who had his windmill on this little hill between the woods and the sea. You cannot expect me to think much of Worthing. There was no possibility of a casual performance there, and all I can remember of it is a vast number of shops, a little bit of sea showing between all the people, and the melancholy sight of the poor fellow squeezing marvellously pathetic music from his accordion being turned off his pitch by a policeman. I didn't read that last bit very well, actually, but there was no possibility of a casual performance there, and all I can remember of is its vast number of shops, a little bit of sea showing between all the people, and the melancholy sight of a poor fellow squeezing marvellously pathetic music from his accordion and being turned off his pitch by a policeman. Clearly the bloke we saw earlier. And we're on to chapter 13, By the Aider to Small Dole, which we will conclude tomorrow. So that's barking on that journey, that last part of his journey. Excuse me, fiddling with my eye. That's mad. The turning on the car park is almost opposite Bostel. The turning for the car park is almost... Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, I mean, without a map, you know, it's funny how you pass this thing so many times up there. You know the turning to Sisbury and the car park, and then the turning to... They're slightly staggered, aren't they? If I remember. Great artist, Linda. Better not mention Eric Gill, Linda. I think he has forgotten where he has been in the years since he actually did the journeying. It's such a weird route, isn't it? They were going to Finland and didn't get to the village. Presumably, the bypass was in the 1960s. The A24 bypass past the Black Horse. So he didn't get as far as the... But presumably, if he'd come out that road, he would have come out by just down the road from the Gun Inn and the village. But he must have, instead of turning into the village, he must have turned south to Worthing. He goes in towards Findon Valley, but not properly into the valley. But enough of the valley was being made, and he didn't like the look of that. So he goes up Bostal, up the Bostal, up to... Well, he doesn't mention the windmill. So if you followed the road up, you'd see the windmill, Salvington Mill. But he doesn't mention that. So presumably he cuts across the field, which I imagine there is a footpath that enables you to do that. And he gets up to the top. Well, if you keep going over, I guess you'd come down the other side, but you're almost going to pass where he was before, where he camped. And then he ends up basically retracing his steps, almost getting as far as Patching Pond, but not quite, where he had been before, ends up in Clapham Wood, then turns directly south again, and ends up on Highdown, which is what you would do, and sees the miller's tomb, which is true, and that's all there. And then presumably as a poke about in Worthing, didn't like it very much, and what, ended up in Montague Street, somewhere down there, maybe where the old town hall is in South Street. Amazing. Bonkers. There is a very indistinct route between Salvington and Clapham, but I don't see how he could find it. Well, I don't think he found it on purpose. Top of School Hill, says Linda Kane. Roadworks. Well, I have no idea about this route business. It's a jolly good listen. So, yes, I know, appreciate there have been lots of people who don't know the area, but if you do know the area, it is a most confusing route. Clearly he didn't take a compass, although a man being out in the countryside, you would think that he would be familiar with the position of the sun and relative to the downs, knowing the downs go east to west and the south and the sun moves across the sky from east to west. You know, just knowing those two things, you probably could work out your direction all the time, especially if you're at the top of the downs, as he was for many of it, that the places would have familiarity. And Chanctonbury Ring was a landmark that he mentions. It's most curious that he ends up going in such peculiar route. But anyway, on the pier, amusement arcade, you would think, yes, he doesn't mention it as such, but we will see in the next chapter. So there we go. How wonderful and interesting to follow anyway in his footsteps, no matter how mad it is. That's one of the things that actually makes it quite charming, is its total whimsical route. Anyway, how many performances has he actually done? Yes, I know. He's trying to work out how he's surviving for money, because he's only done about 5 performances, I think, if that. And we have, let's have a look quickly. We have, well, we got 2 more days. I think we'll finish the book this week, which would be lovely. It's a 2-week book. You can lose the sun in the dense forest, John Buck says. Yes, of course. And of course, in the mist and rain, it would be very easy to do that, I guess. Absolutely. I'm off to watch the video on Black Patch Hill, says Turbo Stream. Oh, yes, there we are. If you put Black Patch Hill and Vobes into YouTube, it should come up, I think. All good stuff. Thank you so much. Take care. I will try and plot the whole journey on the map next week. Thank you, Nigel. Do that and send it over. And I'll see if I agree with it. I'm sure I do. You're much better at map following than me, and of course we've got the reference in his book. If you take a screenshot, well, I don't know, I'll have to send you a photograph of that, because he does make a thing. When I see where he comes into Worthing, he sort of misses Worthing here. His map is really not his route, just roads. So it's actually no help at all. It's not his, it doesn't show his route on it. Anyway, take care. I will catch up with you. I've got the Vogue show to do a bit later on, so I'm going to go and sort out the Essie and my bread and my dinner and all of that. And I will catch you later. Thanks for listening. Great fun. Loving it. Till next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.